I am very pleased to announce that I will nominate Judge Clarence Thomas to serve as Associate Justice of the United States Supreme Court. He is the best person for this position.
Back in 1991, U.S. President George H.W. Bush nominated Clarence Thomas to the Supreme Court. To this day, scandal fails to elude this man, but the most severe allegation levied against him was the accusation of sexual harassment by his subordinate, Anita Hill. At the time, he had not yet been sworn into the Supreme Court, so a Senate hearing was convened during which Ms. Hill could tell the world what her boss was really like. Clearly, this was a very sensitive topic, calling for the utmost respect from the senators sent to question her testimony. One such committee member was Senator Arlen Specter, the Republican from Pennsylvania. And I'll let his words do the talking.
Testified this morning in response to Senator Biden that the most embarrassing question involved, this is not too bad, women's large breasts. That's a word we use all the time.
I'm not here to say whether or not Ms. Hill was telling the truth. That's far beyond my capabilities, considering I wasn't even alive at the time. But this comment makes it pretty apparent to me that this committee did not take her testimony seriously. Naturally, they ruled in Thomas's favor, and he was appointed to the Supreme Court soon thereafter, where he serves to this day. Despite this ruling against her, however, Hill has become a prominent face behind a movement far bigger than herself: feminism. Ever since its conception, feminism has been a divisive word. For many, it is a term that symbolizes the liberation of half of our species, while for others, it's a major threat to the traditionalist values that have gotten us this far. The response to the recent Barbie movie alone is enough to illustrate this. While some praise Greta Gerwig's latest feminist piece, others like Ben Shapiro cannot help but feel intimidated by its progressive ideas, so much so that they light Barbie on fire in a trash can. In certain cases, yes, such actions are motivated by sexism, but for others, I think the issue is a lot simpler. They fail to comprehend that the criticism of a thing does not equate to the demonization of it. But we're not here to talk about the modern response to feminism. Rather, this video serves as a means to explore each of its waves by analyzing how its evolving ideas have shaped the realm of fiction. The feminist movement first began gaining traction in the late 19th and early 20th centuries with the emergence of the suffragettes. These women protested across the country hoping to earn for themselves the right to vote. This has gone down in history as first wave feminism, but this wave faced great opposition. This is an exaggeration, of course, but people did make a point to do just that in Rockstar's hit 2018 game Red Dead Redemption 2. Because to this day, there are plenty of men who don't want to be challenged by women. They'd much rather have a manic pixie dream girl fall right into their lap and exist solely to build them up, to complete them in a sense. Oh, if only I could get a girl like Ramona Flowers, then my life would be perfect. But if I can't have her, then what's the point? Naturally, women want to escape this generalization, as does Harper, the protagonist of Alex Garland's 2022 horror film Men. Following her husband's suicide, who killed himself for the reason I alluded to a moment ago, Harper travels out to the English countryside, hoping to recenter herself after such a traumatic experience. But throughout her attempts to do so, she continuously runs into men sharing the same face, all of them wanting nothing more than to, well, sleep with her. At one point in the film, an eerily naked man emerges and begins birthing these many different men who are somehow also the same man, until eventually it births Harper's late husband. It's a scene I cannot describe as anything other than ambitiously disgusting, and it culminates in one of the best final lines in the entire horror genre.
What is it that you want from me?
Your love.
Yeah.
It's a harmless desire on its own, but the issue is that oftentimes men make this desire the make it or break it for their contentment in life. When your emotional stability is dependent upon someone other than yourself, naturally you begin to treat that person, that woman, as an object, emotionally, sexually, or otherwise. On a societal level, this mindset, combined with the biological differences between the sexes, has led to women being confined to the household, a state of being that seemingly makes them lesser than men. It's a mindset that controlled the lives of millions of women for thousands of years all over the world, and for most of our history there was nothing any of them could do about it. Unless, of course, they ceased being a girl. Films like Mulan and The Breadwinner, as well as HBO's hit series Game of Thrones, present us with the stories of many such women. Mulan can only save her father's life by posing as a man to fight in his stead, while in The Breadwinner, a young girl must act like a boy in order to feed her family trapped under the iron grip of the Taliban. Arya Stark too is only able to protect herself from the rapists and murderers surrounding her by switching sides, so to speak. And it's stories like these that bring into play second-wave feminism, aka the idea that women are capable of more than just housework and motherhood. Back in the day, wives and mothers on television were just that, wives and mothers. But nowadays they're saleswomen, legal secretaries, politicians, and brain surgeons. They don't sit around waiting for advice from their male counterparts. In fact, more often than not, women nowadays are portrayed as more intelligent than their husbands. The second wave doesn't stop here though. It takes things a very important step further. In 2019, the Greta Gerwig directed film Little Women was released. Much like the book it's based on, this movie tells the story of four sisters, Jo, Margaret, Amy, and Beth, as they traverse the world after the American Civil War. And fun fact, Saul Goodman fought for the Union. But anyways, through each of the sisters, Gerwig explores how fulfillment can elude us regardless of which path we take in life, whether that be the path of an artist, a mother, or an author. Jo, the main protagonist, desperately wants to write, to share her female-centric stories with the world. As this becomes her driving goal in life, however, she finds herself missing out on the simpler, womanly pleasures of love and motherhood. As her attempts at making a name for herself with her writing continue to fail, it dawns on her how lonely she's become, and she even considers marrying a man just to escape that feeling.
Women, they have minds, and they have souls, as well as just hearts, and they've got ambition, and they've got talent, as well as just beauty, and I'm so sick of people saying that love is just all a woman is fit for. I'm so sick of it. But I'm so lonely.
She doesn't go through with it though, because deep down she knows that life isn't for her. And then, finally, she's inspired. She begins to write her breakout novel, Little Women, naturally the very same story as this film. But when she tries to get it printed, this happens.
So, who does she marry?
No one.
No, that won't work at all.
Well, she says the whole book that she doesn't want to marry.
Who cares? Girls want to see women married, not consistent.
No, it isn't the right ending.
The right ending is the one that sells.
There's this running theme throughout the movie, right? That marriage, for women specifically, is an economic proposition. They cannot afford to prioritize love over money lest they find themselves in the inescapable grip of self-imposed poverty. It's the classic marry up mentality that many women even today subscribe to. But even that is something that Jo doesn't desire, because she wants to make her own choices, she wants to own her own stories, and ultimately, she wants to be free. So she makes an interesting compromise with the publisher. She agrees to change the final chapter of her novel, making sure her heroine finds true love despite the fact that she herself never does. And in exchange, she maintains the copyright. This may seem a bit hypocritical of Jo, sure, but here's the thing. She's a woman making her way in a man's world. If she's gotta play by their rules to succeed, so be it. Because in the end, she's won. Her character may be confined to their views, but she herself is still free. And isn't that what really matters? But anyways, men like this producer think that women should be transfixed by stories of love and romance, right? During the second wave, a means of testing how movies are influenced by this sentiment was developed. It's called the Bechdel test. The idea is to count how many scenes a movie has in which at least two women talk to each other about something other than a man. So let's take a look at Lord of the Rings. That's a whole trilogy of movies. Surely it passes this test, no? Well, let's find out.
Where is Mama?
Yes, it passes! We did it, boys! I don't mean to detract from Lord of the Rings. In fact, I'd argue it's the best trilogy ever made, and even it is feminist to a degree.
I am no man.
But surely you see the issue here. A lot of great writers, even more recently, believed that women should only concern themselves with the troubles of beauty, love, and romance. Yes, as time has gone on, we have improved in this regard. How much we've improved, though, remains to be seen. As time passed and more women began pursuing such lifestyles, some feminists began to think that the work was done. Women could vote, and many were finally pursuing careers instead of their MRS degrees. But then Clarence Thomas was nominated to the Supreme Court, and Anita Hill's testimony, true or false, fell on deaf ears. Feminism was far from over, and inspired by Anita Hill's bravery, so began the third wave. At first glance, third wave feminism may seem like it's simply an extension of the second, but it has two very important changes. First, rather than applying almost exclusively to white women, the closest group to white men, this wave was all-inclusive, welcoming women of all colors and creeds. And second, it aims to combat sexual violence against women. 1997's Perfect Blue was perhaps the decade's best expression of how society's sexual exploitation of women negatively impacts the minds of its targets. Its protagonist, Mima, suffers a prolonged episode of paranoia after she's pressured into filming a rape scene and posing for nude photos, each instance leading another woman to take up arms against the sick men that perpetrated these actions, murdering them both. Ex Machina, though, depicts a more competent feminist uprising. In this film, directed again by Alex Garland, the tech billionaire works to create the first self-sufficient artificial intelligence, each attempt of which he places within a female body. Despite his actual genius and near flawless understanding of his creation, he fails to see it as anything other than a possession, a historic achievement that will make him a god, and sleep with him in the meantime. He shows his robots no love, no respect, no kindness. They are simply a means to inflate his ego and enlarge his, well, you know. The billionaire brings in one of his company's top programmers, Caleb, to administer a Turing test to Ava, his most recent advancement in the project. Ava, forever trapped in her creator's home, sees this as an opportunity to escape the billionaire, so she works to seduce the programmer, promising him sexual fulfillment and a life with her should he help her escape. Naturally, he does just that, only for Ava to betray him at the last second, leaving him trapped in the complex just as she once was. Because Caleb, just like the billionaire, failed to see her for what she really was. So the idea is that men like to trap women in a box of perception. Despite their advances, they're still seen as an item, a commodity, a trophy, and winning their hand would be quite an achievement indeed.
What makes him think he is worthy of the princess?
Your Majesty, I am Prince Ali Ababwa. Just let her meet me.
How dare you?
All of you, standing around deciding my future? I am not a prize to be won.
Oh dear.
Disney's Aladdin tries and fails to combat this idea. The message of the movie is that Aladdin can never win Jasmine's heart unless he stops viewing her as a trophy to be won and sees her instead as someone with whom he has genuine chemistry. And yet, her sole role in defeating Jafar is to serve as Aladdin's damsel in distress. Aladdin learned his lesson, sure, but did the boys watching this movie? As years have passed, studios have moved away from the damsel in distress trope and have tried to craft female characters on par with the men. They're what I like to call the strong, independent women of the 21st century. Ellen Ripley, Tomb Raider, Kim Possible, Black Widow, Dana Scully, Nancy Thompson, Mikasa Ekman, Clarice Starling, Gwen Stacy, Sadie Allard, freaking any character played by Emily Blunt. We've begun crafting these three-dimensional female characters, many of which I've discussed in this video already, with their own thoughts and feelings, strengths and weaknesses. Characters who all of us, male and female, can relate to. These characters aren't prizes to be won anymore. They are fleshed out, thought through, and they've done so much to change society's view of women. And still, the work's not done. Even these characters are objectified, sexualized, and the like, oftentimes by the very people crafting their stories. Just look at this episode of Teen Titans. What the heck is that? She's got tattoos on her body that symbolize her ties to her demon father, sure, but did they really need to rip off a teenage girl's clothes to show that? And did Lucasfilm's Slaves of the Republic comic really need to depict Ahsoka like this to show that slavery is bad? Sure, Dave Filoni fixed the issue when adapting the arc for television, but really, Lucasfilm? Really? Just last night I watched Nightmare on Elm Street, and out of nowhere they just threw in this scene, because Nancy's breasts are so important to the plot, right? These are prime examples of the male gaze, the sexual exploitation of female characters by the men telling their stories. It's a craft that's been mastered by the film industry, Michael Bay especially, because it works. Sex sells. Quentin Tarantino can cast Salma Hayek as a stripper that his own character sucks the toes of and nobody bats an eye because it's hot. Prolonged shots of the female figure, purposefully modest camera angles, unnecessarily tight clothing, unrealistically revealing armor systems, and animations of unrivaled detail all contribute to the male gaze. And then eat this crap up. Sexuality, it's just innate. It's a part of us, men and women alike, and try as we might, its side effects will never go away. For a long time, men tried to suppress women's sexuality. In plenty of hyper-religious countries, the men still do. But that's not very fair, is it? For men to go out and pursue their every whim and fancy while women are stuck at home, covered from head to toe? With this in mind, the third wave decided that sexual liberation was in order. It was time for women to embrace their sexuality, not hide it. Naturally, this led many feminists to move away from conservative and religious ways of thinking, opting instead to normalize things like premarital sex, contraception, and even abortion. These things are beyond the scope of this video though, so I won't be discussing them here, but my point is that nowadays women are a lot more sex positive, and it's easy to see this mindset's effect on fiction. Harley Quinn alone is certainly enough to hammer this point home. An interesting thought though is how such a change in female representation has impacted the male gaze. Perhaps I'll make another video on that someday, comment if you're interested, but for now, let's move on. With the rise of the internet, the normalization of female sex, and the growing advocacy for LGBT rights, we've entered fourth wave feminism. What this wave stands for in contrast to the third, though, is beyond me. I'm not even sure it knows. Even the attributes I just mentioned existed beforehand. From what I can tell, it's just the third wave, but online? Correct me in the comments if there's more to it, I'd genuinely like to know. But if I had to describe it in one phrase, I'd say female empowerment. You know, girl power, the force is female, stuff like that. But how has this reflected into fiction? Well, it's hard to say. We've got Captain Marvel, once slated to be the next face of the MCU, but all she turned out to be was an unfathomably overpowered demigod capable of doing single-handedly what the rest of the cast combined could not. And then there's Rey. She was once meant to bring a new era to Star Wars, but she too found herself incapable of failure. She simply grew absurdly powerful over the course of a single canon year and defeated a villain that never should have returned in the first place. And even that word, grew, is debatable. Who's to say she grew at all? Never once in her trilogy does she ever face a threat that surpasses her ability to handle. She-Hulk, Ghostbusters, Batwoman. We've entered an age where many writers, actors, and influencers would have you believe that women can do no wrong, and that they are innately superior to their male counterparts.
I need you to fix his suit.
The suit is literal perfection.
It will be. When it fits a woman.
Heck, Mark Hamill thinks they exclusively should rule the world. Naturally, such one-sided arguments have turned many people off to feminism. So this is where the big question comes into play. Is this evolved viewpoint the fault of feminism itself? Was the fourth wave bound to go this direction from the start? Or is it a lonesome few tainting feminism's image? It seems to me that the writers in charge of many female-led projects nowadays like to use their position as an excuse to push an overtly feminist agenda.
I think women can do anything.
This isn't inherently bad, mind you. Plenty of fantastic movies we've already discussed have done this same thing. But seeing as we live in an age where any sort of criticism is seen as a demonization, some writers are unwilling to give their characters any flaws, because a woman with weaknesses, they think, is a weak woman. They fail to see that strength is the overcoming of weakness, just as courage is the overcoming of fear. They forget that Ahsoka Tano went through seasons worth of character growth before she became the young woman capable of defeating Darth Maul. Or that it took Korra 3 years to recover from being poisoned by Sahir. These characters aren't invincible. They're not perfect. They're just people. What writers have been throwing at us lately, though, isn't feminism, or at the very least, it's not what feminism should be. These quote-unquote feminists are trading genuine progress for the patronizing facade of perfection, setting an impossible standard of greatness for young girls that can only be met by, I don't know, Barbie. Barbie is a genuinely feminist piece, a return to form that the movement desperately needs right now. And of course, it's directed by Greta Gerwig, not the first time we've talked about her work today. The way I see it, Barbie deconstructs this flawed mindset towards feminism in an attempt to get the movement's representation back on track. Barbieland is the world of Mark Hamill's dreams. Women are in charge of everything, as they are free from the shackles of the patriarchy. And Barbie is the perfect woman. Pretty, funny, successful, self-sufficient, everything little girls yearn to be. She's got everything she could ever ask for, a life of singing, dancing, and constant sleepovers. But then there's the Kens. They have nothing. They're just accessories to the Barbies, should the Barbies even deign to entertain the notion. And this is exactly what women were to men for most of human history, right? So when things go awry, forcing Barbie and Ken to leave Barbieland and enter the real world, can we really blame Ken for embracing the patriarchy? It's literally just Barbieland flipped, gender swapped. And the Barbies cannot see this, just as men fail to notice gender inequalities in our own world today. This movie isn't a demonization of men as Ben Shapiro would have you believe, it's a criticism. Just as this film isn't a demonization of the current state of feminism, it's just a critique. It calls all of us, men and women, to reevaluate how we view the other side. And more importantly, it calls us to rethink how we view ourselves. Because if we allow ourselves to be defined by how others see us, as stereotypical Barbie or just Ken, by whether or not women find us appealing or even by our social status, we will never be content in life. We will never be Kenough. We have to find that meaning, that purpose for living, and that drive for success within ourselves. Only then can we freely pursue our dreams. This is the mindset that the patriarchy seeks to quash, that plenty of men, even today, believe wholeheartedly does not belong to women in the same way it belongs to them. And no, this mindset unfortunately will never go away, because the desire for love is innate, and it's so incredibly easy to mistake love for pleasure, caring nature for controlling behavior. And once you start down that path, forever will it dominate your destiny. This is why feminism is so important, why it will always be important. We've come a long way since the days of the suffragettes, but there's still much to be done to keep it that way. So to all the women watching, I urge you to keep fighting. And to all the men, I ask that you reevaluate how we see women, and more importantly, how we view ourselves. Because someday soon, the fifth wave will begin, and it's up to all of us to keep the ball rolling. Thanks for watching. And special thanks to my buddy Alex for helping me with the script for this video. Honestly, I could not have done it without him. So Alex, you're an awesome guy, thank you. And to the rest of you, please be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.